Hello everyone and welcome to PCM's Webinar Thursday. We are thrilled to have you with us today for our SNOW webinar, SAM in a SaaS World from Compliance to Optimization. Joining us today is Tim Jesser and Jason Patterson. We're going to get right into our main presentation in just a few minutes, but first I have a few housekeeping items. Please enter your questions in the question box on the right-hand side and I'll relay those to our speaker this morning at the end of the presentation. We do send out a survey at the end of the webinar. Please fill it out and let us know how we did, as well as topics you'd like to see covered on future webinars. You should see that survey in your inbox later today. Speaking of future webinars, please be sure to check out our weekly webinar schedule on our website at www.pcm.com/webinars/archive. We are recording this webinar. It will be available for playback in a few days. Recordings are posted to our webinars page along with our upcoming webinar schedule. There you can also find previous webinar recordings. And with that, we're going to get started, and I'm happy to hand it off to Tim Jesser.
Okay, great. Let me just share my screen.
Looking good.
Okay. You can see my screen fine?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So I'm going to let Jason give us a little bit of an introduction. This is Tim Jesser from SNOW Software, and I'm going to joined by Jason Patterson of PCM. And Jason, I think you're going to kick it off with a little bit of introduction about what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, thanks, Tim, and thanks everyone for joining. Today's topic that we wanted to present to you was software asset management in a SaaS world, how we handle compliance to optimization. And with that, the reason that we thought this topic was so prevalent and one that we wanted to present on was based on that there's been a revolution in the software asset management industry. Yesterday's traditional on-prem perpetual software licenses have moved to today's cloud-based or cloud-hosted and SaaS-based applications. And we've seen this transformation in the SAM world of dealing with less applications of compliance and more towards optimization. With the adoption of cloud-based technologies, we haven't eliminated all compliance issues by moving, products to the cloud and in SaaS applications, but we're seeing it less prevalent. It still exists, but just not as much as it used to be on the traditional sense. And what we're seeing now is this revolution of dealing with the cost mechanisms of software versus the compliance issues as much. SNOW and PCM have been on the forefront of this change. We're prepared for it, and what we're presenting today is some of the pieces that we've seen across the industry. And we've got some very powerful offerings to talk to you about with that change. We've had a revolution inside the PCM services, that the SAM services that have always existed have now included some new offerings that we have in the software data analytics arena in preparation, for this change that's been made across the software asset management industry. And that, of course, has been powered by all of our friends at the SNOW platform. So, Tim, if you could please click to the next slide. I'll just quickly go over some of those offerings, and then Tim will jump right into the webinar about how SNOW is ready for this transformation. Just to set the standards, PCM has a hosted SNOW platform that is hosted in our Tier 3 data centers. And we have many customers on that today, and that platform is readily available to all of our customers. The asset management services, both traditional SAM and software data analytics, we have for all the major software publishers, but the ones that we see most prevalently are for Microsoft, Oracle, SAP, and IBM. But that goes far beyond those 4 publishers. They're just the ones that we see the most. Some of our base services include license reconciliations, that license optimization that we're talking about in the data analytics part that we'll dive into, audit verification services, both for internal audit within organizations and when an organization is coming to you externally to help you verify those claims. We also help in the arena of the creation of a SAM program and or assistance of your program that exists within your organization, all the way up to our managed services that we provide for many organizations today, being their SAM provider or partner, with some core publisher work. And then at the end, what we're going to talk about is a little bit of our PCM exclusive offerings of the SNOW platform. We've got some new exciting announcements to share with everyone of our platform changes. And with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Tim to present today's topic. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Great. Thanks, Jason. So let me start with some basics. And in doing that, I'll show you a slide that I call the new normal. And really, it's a look a little bit into the future, right? For some of you, the picture here might be a ways off. For others, just a year or two. And for some, this might be a reality right now, because what I've drawn is a world in which the majority to the vast majority of our IT infrastructure is provisioned from the cloud. Really, what started in the late 90s with Salesforce and a few online storage services is simply becoming the way applications and data are delivered across the front office, back office, and beyond for all types of technology. If you look at it, today nearly 100% of organizations are using at least one cloud service. But the real story is not those that are dipping their toe into the water, but what happens when the 30% year-over-year growth of cloud adoption flips the paradigm for most all of you from an on-prem centric model to a cloud-dominated model. Now, the drivers behind that growth, the growth of cloud, are really clear. They include improved agility, better user experience, support for digital transformation initiatives. But what's less discussed is the cost implications of the transition to cloud. Or I should say cost is discussed, but usually in the context of how much cloud is going to save on license costs and optimization. There's little mention of cloud potentially costing more than on-prem. Now, it doesn't have to, but it can. And so let's cover a little bit about that. The first thing I'll do to put the issue of cloud costs into context is that I think it helps to break down what we mean by cloud. And to do that, I'm going to use pizza as a metaphor. So let's look at our pizza options, right? You've got make it at home. You do everything yourself. You're taking care of it. You've got take and bake. I know one of the places in the U.S. is called Papa Murphy's. I think those places are kind of gross, but that's okay. Some people like them. The point here is that they've handled a few more things for you, right? Now we move up the chain to delivery. Pretty much almost everything is handled for you, except a few things you have to handle at home. And then finally, dine in. You go to the restaurant. It's all handled for you. You walk in, eat, walk out. You didn't handle anything. That metaphor directly maps to the dominant forms of cloud services today. So let's take a look at them. On-prem, you're handling everything. IaaS, well, you provided a couple things. If you look at some of the vendors out there, AWS, Google Compute, Microsoft Azure, and some others, they're handling just some of the basics, the infrastructure, where you get the infrastructure as a service. PaaS, they're handling a bit more. Platform as a service, they're providing you a little bit of operating system or middleware functionality. And then finally, SaaS. All you do is, just like walking into that restaurant, you just show up with your browser. You did not handle any of the foundational stuff or the application or anything. It's all hosted and managed by the vendor. So that kind of sets the context of what we mean by cloud services today. There are other cloud services that we're going to cover, but when I say cloud services today, this is what I'm talking about. These are these dominant forms of cloud services. So we've got a foundational understanding of cloud services. Let's apply software asset management to these cloud offerings and really kind of look at what's different when we talk about on-prem cloud services and what's not. To do that, I'll start with our end goal in mind. And this is a vision of software asset management covering all of our software users, regardless of the deployment platform. SAM should cover our cloud usage and consumption of software. It should cover our mobile device. It should cover our desktop. It should cover data center. We want to get to this place, this vision of where our SAM platform is handling all of our software consumption and usage, regardless of deployment platform. So then we're good, right? Just take our SAM technology and practices and extend them to the cloud. Well, that's partly true, as I'll cover in a bit, but there are definitely some key differences we need to consider, some key differences about cloud that make it a little bit different. The first comes when we look at SAM's traditional role as provider of license compliance. And Jason referred to this in the beginning, right? How, great, that's what SAM does. But cloud is different, right? Because compliance concerns while they don't go away entirely, when you think about cloud, they are lessened. Think about it, right? If the vendor is the one who's providing you with this software, well, then naturally they know when you're using it. They don't need to go in and count later. They have a complete record of what you're using. So that issue of we're going to audit you, we're going to find out what you're really using, that goes away. They know exactly what you're using, and they're not terribly worried about getting undercharged. So who should be worried? You should potentially be worried about being overcharged or buying too much. And that's where SAM comes in. And that's where we've got to consider SAM's second primary value proposition, the optimization of license spend. And this optimization relies on that same holistic usage visibility that we discussed from a compliance perspective, the same complete view of all software usage that we use to establish an ELP, an effective license position, and prepare for an audit defense, is the same view that we're going to utilize to contain costs for cloud services. So what will shift for software asset management and IT leaders in this new cloud-centric world is not the core values that SAM provides, but rather the relative importance, the relative focus of those values. As cloud adoption increases, the focus on compliance will lessen, though again, not go away, and the focus on cost containment will increase. Here's another way to think about this, right? In an on-premise world, the burden was on the software vendor to identify customers who were not paying according to their license agreement. In the SaaS world, vendors can easily determine how much is owed. So the burden is now on you. The burden is now on the customer to think about that and to maintain those costs, to contain those costs. The second primary difference is how cloud obscures visibility. And yes, that pun was intended. I think it's just too good to pass up. But when I talk about lack of visibility, it can take a lot of forms, right? The first is that we can get spend data, right? Most of these SaaS providers give you a platform. It shows, hey, here's what you're spending today. But they don't tell you how much you should be spending. They don't give you any usage visibility. Say, yeah, that's my bill, that's my monthly bill, that's how many licenses I have, that's great, but am I using it? They're not terribly incented to give you that data. The next is lack of centralized view. If each one of these SaaS applications has a portal, well, that's fine if I've got maybe one or two, but what about when I have 10 SaaS applications, or 20, or 50? Am I going to go to 50 different SaaS applications to get visibility into how I'm using them? Probably not. Another one is an example of multiple platforms. So this is an IaaS example where you're saying, gosh, I'm using AWS and Azure. How can I get a centralized view? Right now, that's a little bit tough. Secondly is unutilized and underutilized SaaS resources. As I said, it's difficult to get visibility into that. And finally, we do have one compliance challenge. I said it didn't go away entirely. Let me explain what I mean by that. One of the risks which a lot of organizations aren't considering is compliance, license compliance and license usage within infrastructure as a service environment. So when I spin up these AWS instances and these instances on Azure, well, I'm probably using licenses, naturally, right? I'm using an Oracle database license, or I'm using a, maybe a Java license to create that environment. Well, what are the licensing implications of that, and how could that be affecting what I owe these vendors if I were to be audited? So just to repeat there, it's compliance concerns don't go away with cloud, they're lessened, and here's an example of where they don't go away entirely, they are still an issue. So I promised earlier, I said I'd cover the differences of SAM as applies to cloud services and the similarities. So the good news is that in spite of these differences, the foundational SAM practices don't change when it comes to handling cloud. So the first among those foundational things, first among those foundational issues is, and one that's especially important to cloud, is discovery. Specifically, automated multi-platform IT asset discovery that extends from mobile devices to desktops and data center to cloud. Whenever and however software and services are consumed, the IT leaders and their team needs to know about it. Like many on this, likely many on this call already have discovery tools and processes in place, and yet there are still gaps. So let's take a look at some of the common mistakes organizations make when trying to build their discovery capabilities. So there's four. There's four that I'm going to cover. I'll list them out, and then we'll go into the details on each one. The first is assuming, hey, I'm okay. I'm okay today, right? I'd say that's probably not true. I'd say most, if not all, attendees on this calls do have gaps in their current discovery. The difference comes in those who are aware of those gaps. The next two center around those specific gaps in the area of cloud and mobile and virtual. These are the technologies where existing tools and processes often fall short. The last is around the different ways that SaaS is typically licensed. So organizations need to account for consumption of SaaS applications. So let's dig into each one of these. I said assuming you're okay is the wrong approach. This is I'm okay, you're not okay, kind of the opposite of the 70s ethos. And so a critical step is assessing where your organization stands today. If you have one, determine if your SAM software is capable of discovering cloud, mobile, and virtual assets. And if it can, to what depth? Can it track simply if an application has been used, or can it track how it's been used and what components within that application have been used? Next, even if you have a SAM solution, and especially if you don't, what other sources of discovery might be available to you? Do you have SCCM, an ITSM tool such as ServiceNow, or perhaps even a CASB, a Cloud Access Security Broker? You know, all of these can be incomplete, but still valuable sources of information if you don't have a SAM in place. As I'll describe in a few slides, even when you have a robust SAM practice, you are still likely to be consolidating multiple discovery data sources. So finally, think about what kind of discovery approach is right for your organization and whether this approach will include agents. Agents bring out surprisingly strong feelings within IT, right? It's no way to take a much more neutral approach. The fact is that agent or agent list-based approach each have its pros and cons. We found the important thing to do is support both approaches, whether that be use of agents or saying, no, you know, we can't use agents, as neither one is going to be right for each organization. All right. The next is to build cloud and mobile visibility. As I said, a lot of discovery tools today can't support them, so we've got to build out this capability for them. We're going to utilize software asset management and enterprise mobility management to discover and track mobile devices. We want to get visibility into application usage and installation on these devices. We also want to build out that visibility for IaaS, right? One of the ways we can do that is centralize the creation of new IaaS virtual environments. If each organization has access to AWS or Azure, they're going to be spinning up VMs, and we're not going to have great visibility into why. We'll get the monthly bill, we'll find out what environments are created, we just won't know why, who's creating them, and are they being used efficiently. And that'll push us towards more efficient tracking of IaaS spend. Oh, I think I missed a few slides, sorry about that. I'm on the right slide now. The second is when we talk about getting visibility into virtualization. Right? We need to make sure that our software asset management solution can handle that license model complexity, that it can handle discovery of data center topology. And it needs to be able to discover virtual environments on desktops. So both virtual machines and environments within the data center and also on the desktop. It needs to be able to connect to both physical hardware and instances that are deployed using virtualization technology. And finally, we've got to be able to determine the virtualization configuration. It can't just say, okay, I see it. It needs to be able to dig in and say, well, okay, how many cores are being used on that? Did you deploy a virtual desktop interface, something like AppFi from Microsoft, or you're using Citrix? It needs to be able to handle all of these different technologies, all of these different configurations, all of these different usages of virtual technology. It needs to be able to recognize them and recognize that they are virtual as opposed to actual instances, because the licensing implication and the cost implication when it's virtualization can be quite different. So next I talked about consumption, right? The difference between a lot of the on-prem models and the SaaS models is that they key off of consumption of this. If you're consuming it, sometimes they get down to, for IaaS example, they're getting down to the minute-by-minute usage of these applications, which is just quite a bit different than any concept that we ever had with regards to on-prem. So we need to put in place these consumption analytics with a structured plan based on audit risk, based on unplanned cost and business interruption in mind, so that we don't get the situation that a lot of people run into, which is this runaway IaaS expense, which isn't handled with their current budgeting processes. Okay, once we've done that, we've built this strong discovery solution which covers all of these gaps that I had mentioned, all the gaps on virtual technologies or cloud or mobile. Well, what next? What do we do next? And this is returning to what I said before, which is that I'm saying we're going to build this consolidated normalized inventory. Well, that's what we do for on-prem applications, right? That's right. We're going to do the same thing for cloud, and we're going to take that cloud usage and cloud consumption and build it into a single foundation for our software consumption. So we take those information from multiple inventory data sources. It can be literally multiple. We could be pulling from ServiceNow, pulling from SCCM, pulling from an inventory client, and pulling perhaps, for example, from Snow inventory client, and consolidating it all into one place. And what we need to do at that point is normalization. Snow has a normalization engine. There are others out there that take all of that information from all of those sources and dedupe. They reconcile the titer, the vendor, the version across all of the devices when you're in your environment. They strip out things like, do I care about every single patch level? Probably not. Do I care about every major, minor release? Probably not. I just want to find out for the machines in my environment and for those software usage, what am I using? What is the core atomic unit of licenses which I need to look at? And that's what normalization is going to provide you. So where does that get us, right? We talked about how visibility provides IT leaders with influence, or as we create this view, it creates influence. Let's dig into exactly what that means. With visibility, IT leaders put themselves in a central position of being the ones who can see the big picture. And with that insight into IT use across all areas of the business, the IT leaders can redefine their role from one of command and control to chief influencer. We know that cloud enables the decentralization of technology purchasing. That's not something which is going to change. My point today is not, hey, we're going to get you back in control. Everything is going to come through IT again. No, that cow has probably left the barn. It's not coming back. So what can we do? Well, what we can do is follow this influencer strategy. And the influencer strategy is needed because nothing's going to reverse that trend of increased business unit IT and decreased IT centralization. And so we shouldn't waste time fighting it. Instead, with complete visibility into network assets, software spend, and services, the people in IT can put themselves in this perfect position to influence how the organization and individual business units consume software. And we can start to drive costs, we can drive efficiencies, and prevent security risks. Once they have this insight, once they have this centralized view of insight, they can become the chief broker of IT spend, the go-to person that business units look to when we're saying, hey, how can we drive the best deal? You know, how can we create virtual teams across multiple business units with common interests and goals? You can't do that unless you have that visibility, and no one else other than IT is going to have that visibility. Yes, the purchasing decisions have become diffused throughout the organization. Yes, there's been that decentralization, but only IT is the one which can really get visibility across the organization. So that's where they can maintain their importance as their role really changes from that command and control to one of influencer. So let's give a few examples of where that's been true. These are some Snow customers that we've worked with recently. The first is a global manufacturer, about 10,000 employees, 24 million software budget, and they knew that they needed to optimize on vendors, especially Microsoft, Adobe, SAP, and Oracle. And those were some of the same ones that Jason had mentioned earlier in the call. So let's just take a look at two examples of software. And there were more, but these are some of the most promising ones. Microsoft Project 2016, right? They knew they were going to transition to the new version, and they knew they had 1,500 installations. They would normally look at SCCM, Microsoft SCCM, and say, okay, how many have I got? I've got 1,500. Great. Let's buy 1,500 of the next version. And that would have cost about $700,000, right? Instead, they said, hey, you know, let's look at the usage metering data from Snow. Let's look at how many, not how many I paid for, not how many are installed, but how many people are actually using it. And what they found is only 380. They only had 380 active users of MS Project out of the 1,500 installed. And they got that data from the usage metering in Snow. So right there was 521,000 of savings, because they only had to buy 380 licenses, plus they even bought 10% extra for just to have them available. And even after that 10% extra, they're still looking at $500,000 savings. They performed a similar exercise for Microsoft Visio, and the actual usage numbers were even smaller, which also saved over 6 figures. So the next one is Tableau, right? Tableau is not cheap. Tableau is about $2,000 per year per user. And what the administrator was able to do is take that same thing and say, hey, you know, what can I do to know who's actually using this thing? We've rolled it out quite widely. As with a lot of BI tools, you find many people who say, gosh, I need that. I've got to have that. I'm going to look at this thing every month. Yeah, that's great, but they don't. And so if we have the visibility into who's using it, this is obviously a SaaS-based application, Snow was able to say to them, here's who's using it, here's who's not using it. Bam, 22 licenses right there with just in a couple days effort to find out, hey, here's where I can save another $44,000. And that can continue. You can continually look at who's using what. And depending on your contract, you may be able to save that money now, or you may have to wait for the renewal period. Okay, next example. This was an EMEA vehicle inspection company over in Europe. 37,000 employees, large organization, across 50 countries. And they really needed better visibility of software usage. The reason for that is that they had really rapid growth due to acquisitions, and that created this fragmented view of what was in use. And, you know, that was an issue, but then what really kicked them into gear is that they were hit with a Microsoft audit. And they said, gosh, you know, it's time. We really got to create a centralized view. So with regards to compliance, SAM provided that centralized, uniform way of counting and managing licenses, and that got them ready for audits. But in terms of a cost savings perspective, that same centralized view, once compliance was established, they were able to create that, to pool licenses and effectively reassign rights to new employees. So that centralization, that single process to understand all license usage and software usage across the organization, across all these different business units that have been jammed together, it directly led to $700,000 in savings so far. Matter of fact, since we wrote this up, we've been working with them, and they just continue to take on more and more applications, and for each one, they're finding a lot of savings. So let me do a summary, and then I'm going to pass it back to Jason. So we've covered a lot, right? So let me try and sum it up. We know that the relentless shift to cloud deployment holds promise, but also, and especially financial risk, right? The key to mitigating that risk is establishing complete visibility across the enterprise. And complete means all users, all departments, all deployment types, all devices, all applications. And when we get this visibility through automated discovery that is capable of finding cloud, capable of finding mobile, capable of finding virtual asset, it also needs to account for all license models, especially consumption-based models, which are more prominent within cloud deployment. So if organizations can consolidate and normalize this information, they can assume that role of influencer, not necessarily gatekeeper as it was in the past, but influencer that can enable the business to meet their goals. They can stop being, kind of the organization of no, or the organization of go through here. Instead, hey, how can I work with you? How, business unit, what do you need? How can I work with you? How can I help you make technology decisions which are going to work for you and for the organization? So that's my part. I'm going to pass it back over to Jason, who's going to talk a little bit more about what this means in practice and what some of the offerings that PCM have built out, which really make these thoughts that I've put together real.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. And as Tim mentioned, we're seeing tremendous traction among our customer base around this optimization and the traditional compliance, for on-prem pieces. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we have created a platform with Snow. It's hosted in the PCM data center. It is a SaaS application that we have many customers on, and we can bring customers on that platform very quickly. We also have options for on-prem version if you'd rather have on-prem. And what we've done is all of the great pieces that Tim has shared with you today is now available in that platform, and we've wrapped services around that. And I said at the beginning, we've got some offerings that are only available through PCM in North America, including the ability to use that Snow platform for just Office 365, right? It's the world's most prevalent SaaS application. We're seeing tremendous traction of that across all organizations that we're working with and kind of getting to the right sizing. And we've got some great customer testimonials that we've been using, helping customers through this. We're identifying the usage around Office 365 and really optimizing the profiles and the times that you have the ability to change the profiling to really hone in on what the usage is and what the needs are versus against lack of data for what we think the needs are, right? And it's making tremendous impacts financially with our customers that we've been doing that work for. We also have the ability now on the Snow platform to do it for a single publisher. The one that's most prevalent is Microsoft. It's usually the largest spend within every IT organization from a publisher basis. So we can offer to you the ability to use the powerful Snow platform and wrap services around that for just Microsoft. Like I said, we're the only provider that can do that with the Snow platform. We also have the ability to get you the system for 5 total publishers. A lot of organizations want to focus on their tier 1 highest spend publishers. So we've got the ability from a tooling platform basis to cover that. And then as why it's always been available is the full system, the power behind 40,000 plus publishers of that full system is always available as well. And Tim has mentioned the great aspects of using the Snow agent. It's one that I suggest to do. There's also now the new Snow Cloud Discovery, but we can connect to existing discovery and inventory sources through that hosted platform as well. So I just want to make that clear from an option standpoint. And Tim, if you go to the next slide, please. We wanted to talk about our managed services. It's the one that we're seeing, pretty prevalently among our customers also. This is where we're using the Snow platform again, and we're wrapping ongoing services that have 1- and 3-year options with multiple publishers or single publishers. It's a very customized offering based on your needs. And what we're doing is offering services that happen quarterly. I talk about daily interaction with quarterly reporting to really hone in on what your reconciled position is, identify any risks, and then help eliminate them, in that type of system. So as it mentions there, the focus is risk reduction, cost savings, and license optimization. We're seeing tremendous traction that the service like that in managed service combined with the Snow platform is creating massive ROI for organizations that have fallen under that particular program. So we'd be happy to kind of go more in depth with each of your organizations about that. And then we wanted to introduce the new Microsoft SAM Managed Service Program. I'm not sure if a lot of your organizations have heard about this. This is a new program that's been offered by Microsoft as a publisher, that it comes with greatly reduced audit risk when you enter that program. You do have to share data with Microsoft 2 times a year, but with that it comes with a lot of benefits. Some of the benefits include windows of uninstallation and downgrades with 0 financial penalty, meaning if you have compliance issues for your on-prem licensing, you enter the program and you want to go into an uninstallation period, you can do that with no risk whatsoever. With that comes each quarter new recorded lines of entitlement, meaning, and this is the piece within that program that's known as Fresh Start, that every quarter when we deliver the effective license position to you, it records the new line of entitlement that is known from that date forward as your recorded line of the licenses that you own against your reconciled position. And if anyone has ever gone through an audit with Microsoft, you know how important that is to record that line of entitlement of exactly what you own. And then, as I mentioned before, it's got those quarterly reconciliations within there, the true-up forecasting that can be so important with managing budgets and cost allocations within an organization, as well as establishing that risk register, documenting those items and helping reduce it, and that's reviewed quarterly, and then having an annual SAM maturity rating done with that. So any of these programs are available to PCM customers, and we'll be happy to share with you, what the capabilities are. And all of this is being provided on our Snow platform. So it's important, and we appreciate our friends at Snow that have worked with us on creating these new offerings that are helping customers really all over the world, with dealing with not only compliance but also cost optimization. And I think with that, Tim, we were going to go to the next slide and open it up to the moderator for any Q&A as well as any next steps.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, any questions, please feel free. I think George said to put the questions in the chat. So George, do let us know if any questions have come across.
Yes, no problem, gentlemen. I got a couple questions for you. The first one is, what types of software does Snow offer?
Okay.
So I think, yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry,
Jason.
Tim, go ahead. Okay. Yeah, I think maybe that's leaning towards how you can purchase Snow. It's traditionally provided either on-prem with a perpetual license that would be hosted on your infrastructure, or the hosted options through PCM come with a subscription basis, usually either 1-year or 3-year options, and it's hosted in the PCM data center. So you can buy it either way as a subscription or perpetually.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah, and if anyone wants some additional details on the components of the Snow solution, we can include those in the Q&A follow-up.
All right, and it looks like there's only one more, and it goes, have you considered the cost of SaaS might be double that of perpetual licenses?
Yeah, so it can be, right? And that's where software asset management comes in. One of the concerns with SaaS is that, this is what I talked about, why cost optimization is so important, is overbuying of licenses. You look at someone like Microsoft and their Office 365 solution. They're really pushing it first because it's a good product, but because it can lead to more cost, but it doesn't have to. And that's where software asset management comes in, where it's looking for, hey, do you have duplicate license out there? Do you have unused licenses out there? And if you consider, really, that's where it's not only software asset management, but it's what PCM applies on top of that. The processes and the management that they're going to provide for your environment to make sure that you're really not facing those SaaS bills, which, as the questioner rightly points out, hey, cost savings with SaaS is not a gimme. It can be the opposite. And that's where you really need that combination of a software asset management solution with someone managing it that's really going to drive down those costs and make sure you don't run into that situation. Jason, does that sound about right?
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, in Office 365, we actually have offerings within PCM that it comes with the subscription to include software asset management services and the data analytics services on the STO platform. So we have offerings where it comes automatically with it because of that cost containment is so important. And we're seeing so many customers with so much traction around really right-sizing that. And the only way that you can right-size it is with data behind it so that it doesn't, that spend doesn't come out of control. It's actually in greater control than you ever had, even with your on-prem, pieces of Office. So yeah, I would love to talk to customers about that in depth and how we go about doing it and then how we could do it for you.
All right, gentlemen, I got one more coming in, and it goes, what are the prospects for ITAM and ITSec to work together?
Yeah, that's great. That's actually something that we've been thinking about. So that just to break down those acronyms for anyone not familiar with it, IT asset management and security, right? Where is the overlap? How can these things work together? Snow has actually been building out this capability for a while. And the primary overlap comes when we try and think about, hey, what is going on in my organization and what are the vulnerabilities which exist in my organization today. Let me give you an example of just one area where software asset management can help with regards to security, and that's vulnerability assessment and patch management. If we look at some of the recent hacks, in particular the most recent one that focused on that strutnet vulnerability, this came from an unpatched system. Okay, software asset management can be used to go out and look in your organization and say, hey, what's the patch level that I have on these machines? Great, I've got that. Let me compare it against the known vulnerability database provided by the NIST that maintains that database and say, are there any of the machines out there which have a known vulnerability that is not at the right patch level? Okay. Now, how can I remediate that? And then you can utilize some of the workflow technologies that software asset management vendors, some software management vendors, not all, Snow provides it, a workflow capability to in fact remediate that patch, to fix that patch level on that machine, or to in fact disable that machine so that it can't continue to represent a threat. So that's just one example of where we're seeing this overlap, a growing overlap actually, between software asset management and the security groups.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. That appears to believe, I believe that's the final question. I'll leave the floor open for any closing statements.
Oh, you can take it, Jason. That'd be great.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for attending. We hope that this has been informative, for you. And if you have any questions about, the offerings that we talked about and the pieces and parts, please reach out to your PCM representative. And if you are a potential PCM customer and you don't have a representative, you can send me an email personally. We'll provide that information as well as some aliases into PCM, and we'd be happy to work with you and talk to you about the different offerings that we have available. But yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for their time.
All right. Thank you very much. With that, many thanks to our speakers, Tim and Jason, and thank you all for joining us today. Please be sure to check out www.pcm.com/webinars for on-demand recordings and for our upcoming webinar schedule. Thanks again for joining us, and we hope to see you again for future webinars. Have a great day.